Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah, Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Tuesday, June 15th, and you may have noticed on Friday I was not able to host the show because I am on the island of Puerto Rico and the power has been privatized as of a week ago yesterday after much fighting. The Fiscal Control Board, which is tied to the hedge funds in the States, which basically is able to circumvent all democracy on the island. Meaning if the Senate, if the Capitol decides to vote one way and the governor decides to support something, it could all be basically nullified by the Fiscal Control Board. And so that plays into a lot of the island's dynamics. And why do I say that? Because there have been protests in response to the privatization of the power grid here. And this company called Luma, a new company, has taken over PREPA, which is the public utility. And of course, the union workers and labor are fighting back with lawsuits across the board. They're doing all they can. And their case is only made stronger when Luma continues to mishandle the transition by bringing in line workers from the Midwest, by bringing in vehicles that are not suited for the island of Puerto Rico. And of course, PREPA knows how to do this because PREPA employs folks from the island. They employ trained labor, and they use vehicles that are made for the island. Why do I say that? Because if you're going to fix lines in the mountains, you want to have vehicles that know how to navigate those mountains. Those are just a couple of examples. But, you know, we didn't actually have to make this case in Puerto Rico. People didn't have to make this case because they understood firsthand that when you are an island and you are not tied to a national grid, it is even more important to be self-sufficient. But Texas wants to take their way of living to the whole country because Texas decided to also privatize and get off of the national grid. And now, in Texas, in the middle of summer, you are seeing a risk of losing power, air conditioning, and sometimes water is generated through power in the middle of a heat wave. Today is 95 degrees in Houston. Let's roll this clip of a Texas senator who, something happened, guys. You there? We good? Something just happened. Can we play that clip real quick?
We're not going to air condition them. One, we don't want to. Number two, we couldn't afford it if we wanted to.
Well, hold on there. Let's back up to number one, shall we? We don't want to. Because after you say that, it doesn't really matter what you say next. If people don't care about fixing a problem, they're just not going to fix it, however simple the solution is.
So that was John Oliver responding to this Texas senator who is stating that they don't want to pay for the air conditioning of prisoners. In prisons where the temperature can get up to 150 degrees because of circulation, because of, I don't know, most of these prisons are probably concrete, and many other factors. Don't forget that COVID rates were higher in prisons. I have no idea what the situation is in Texas right now in terms of vaccinations, but if by any chance someone is sick with COVID, I imagine it's not great when it's 150 degrees and you have a human rights situation on your hands. So not only is this senator pro-privatization and keeping the private grid system, he doesn't want to pay. He doesn't even want to pay the company to make sure that air conditioning is provided in prisons. And simultaneously, they're urging consumers to, cut back on air conditioning in the middle of the summer when there's a heat wave. Cut back on, ice. Cut back, turn your refrigerators off at night. Just do all you can. Put on a sweater, as Jimmy Carter once said. How about we actually take our energy grid seriously? How about we transition off of coal power plants and natural gas and go to solar in a state like Texas, where there's free sun all day long? How about we trust our government and actually fund it and transition off of these ancient forms of providing energy? I mean, Jimmy Carter knew this in the late 70s. Why are we having this conversation still? You know why we're having this conversation still? Because Republicans are on a rampage. They are trying to wreck all public works at a time when public works it's what's going to get us out of this crisis. So I talked to you on an island of Puerto Rico where I'm literally in this moment dealing with power issues, where our show had to go off air on Friday because there was no power to turn on the Wi-Fi. And my phone was jammed up, where I had to walk home on Friday night, very late at night in the dark, because I could not get a taxi or an Uber on the way home because the power went out. And we had to leave and go home from the restaurant. And I couldn't get, yes, this is what happens. There are consequences to these actions or inactions. When they want to privatize and make money, it's funny that they're not interested in simultaneously making it so that there's a more, listen, they could hire talent that was local at least. No, they have to outsource it from the Midwest to come here. This is what happens with privatization. There's never a plan. There's never a transition to solar or clean energy. It's always, let's keep up with the old and just find a cheaper way to provide services. But there's no way to anger voters more, even your own Republican voters, than putting it on them. I don't know how this works out in the end, even in a state like Texas. I don't know how Ted Cruz is not vulnerable, or some of these other Republicans who are up for re-election in tight districts. I don't know how they're not vulnerable, because if there's something that voters care about a lot, it's making sure that they have power on, that they have air conditioning in the middle of the summer, that the potholes are filled. That's where being a politician comes into hand. So it's on the Democrats now to make it extremely clear that when you say privatization, it means your power is not on in the middle of the summer. When you say privatization and not being connected to the national grid, it means you're stealing jobs away, local jobs away. When you say privatization and not being tied to some sort of public service, it means that your energy costs are going to go up and the burden is going to be put on you. And that is the job of the Democrats right now. Make it very clear that these are the Republicans who are making your life more difficult on a day-to-day basis because what? One of their donors is making a little bit of extra money, or because they want to keep the oil and gas industry funded. Make it very clear that you don't have air conditioning on in the middle of the summer and you had to walk home in the middle of the night, dark, because the Republicans were more interested in privatizing your power. And what else is next? You'll see. That's what the Democrats should be doing, making it very, very clear. We have a wonderful show today. We have Micah Uetricht, who is here, and later we have Ben Dixon and Napoleon the Legend to talk about today's news. We will be right back after this break. Welcome back. I am so excited. Our friend Micah Uetricht is on our show today to talk about the state of the movement because he wrote a book with Megan Day. Of course, Micah is also the deputy editor of Jacobin Magazine, the host of Jacobin, the radio podcast, The Vast Majority. And before the book he's on here to talk about, he wrote a book about the Chicago teachers unions and the strike. It's called The Strike for America, Chicago Teachers Against Austerity. But he's also the co-author of Bigger Than Bernie, How We Go from the Sanders Campaign to Democratic Socialism, published by Verso Books, one of our partners. Micah, the state of the revolution, where are we?
Well,
feeling not great.
I was going to say, I mean, I think there's two things to say about the state of the revolution. One, many people like you don't feel particularly great about it. And they feel that way, despite the fact that actually it's in fairly good shape, all things considered. The explosion of left energy that has taken place since the first Bernie Sanders campaign is pretty unique in recent American history. We haven't seen anything like it for at least a half a century. The state of the left, like the socialist left and the broad progressive left in this country, is actually better than it has been for many decades. So I think a lot of people are feeling a little down right now because nobody quite knows what to do since the high of the Bernie campaign. I mean, the Bernie campaign literally took our hopes as high as they could possibly go, thinking we could have an actual socialist in the most powerful position in the world. But, that didn't come to pass, and that's very unfortunate. I'm sad about that every day. But actually, this movement has been kickstarted by those two presidential campaigns and is making a lot of progress. And people actually should keep their chins up because the prospects for decent left-wing politics in this country, despite everything, are actually better than they've been in a long time right now.
The conditions are ripe, right? The conditions are ripe, and they have been ripe. But my concern is not so much to be Debbie Downer, like, wow, we're like the end of the world's coming and the movement's not real. My concern is that there is this energy and it's not being channeled in the most effective ways. Winning a few seats here and there electorally, great. Changing the public opinion on things like funding the police and many teachers. I mean, that's a great example you've written about extensively. The Republicans are always thinking like 75 years in advance, and like they don't have the majority of people in this country, but they've been able to gerrymander the hell out of this country. We're in a census year; it's probably going to happen again. They've been able to keep their slim majorities in state houses. In some state houses, they have much larger majorities. And yet we're like, oh, yay, we got 3 seats in Congress this cycle. That doesn't make a difference right now. We need to literally take an army, a brigade of 150 Congress members in and 5 more senators and sit on Joe Manchin's lawn and do whatever we need to do there to make our points. But that's what I'm feeling. I'm just the energy's not going in the right directions.
Well,
please make me feel better, Micah.
Okay, well, everything you just said, I agree with, except for the last part, which is that the energy is not going in the right directions. Because it's always important to remember, there's only, out of all of the hundreds of members of Congress, for example, there's only a small handful of people who identify as democratic socialists and a couple more people who identify sort of broadly in the progressive left. And yet, look at what that small number, that very small minority, this kind of militant minority of left-wing congressional members has been able to do in American politics, just with the small handful of them. They have been able to really reshape the political conversation in this country and open up new political possibilities that didn't exist previous. I mean, I'm not happy with everything that Joe Biden has done in his first couple months, of course, on the domestic front, to say nothing of the foreign policy front. But I don't think that we would be seeing the kind of large-scale spending that we have been seeing from Joe Biden if we did not have this changed political context where the wind is at the sails of this progressive left in this country, and socialist left sometimes in particular. That has transformed our political debate and is resulting in some real wins on the table. Of course, as you said, not enough. Of course, there needs to be double, triple, quintuple, 100 times as much as what's happening right now. But this is what we would expect to happen in a sort of long-term movement. I mean, even the right, which you mentioned in the beginning of what you just said, they've got an infinite amount of money, which makes things a lot easier for anything they want to do. But they had to do a years and decades long process of sort of slogging through the institutions and building up a bench and building up institutions like magazines and think tanks and everything else in order to be, culminate in 1980, right, when Ronald Reagan wins the presidency. And then we've been sort of living in that world ever since. So these things take a little while. And what we're talking about here in this reborn left, the reborn left that Megan Day and I chronicle in the book, is one that's only been around for about 5 years at this point. And so we shouldn't be too rosy about its prospects, but we also shouldn't say that it's nothing either. I think in a country that so successfully snuffed out the idea of socialism as something that was possible to talk about in American public life without being seen as a totally insane person. I mean, of course, it's going to be a long-term process to rebuild that movement, but I think we're making good progress on it.
You're a student of history. I've been really grappling with this idea of revolutions traditionally, historically, launching and organizing and really growing in rural communities rather than cities. And I think, I live in New York, and a lot of the big leftist leaders that have emerged in the last, few years, not just in New York and other cities, are from cities. And I'm just curious, like we talked about the conditions at the top, are the conditions the same everywhere? Like, how do we make sure that, for instance, there are capital interests in New York, right? And it's one thing to get somebody elected into the legislature, but who's to say that in 3, 4, 5 years or terms, they're going to be as left as they were before? I mean, the conditions are, a lot of opportunities to end up siding with certain industries. And I could name a few that, Richie Torres is a perfect example. He was really progressive as a city council member. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are major differences in different contexts, whether it's geographic or whether the political conditions that are present now change later. To that last point, I think that's why it's important to build up organizations. We write a lot in the book about the Democratic Socialists of America, but Justice Democrats and others that exist that can discipline candidates and make sure that they don't just sort of float away as the political winds shift and maybe the country's mood goes back to the right. We need people who are disciplined, who are committed to the long haul for a real left politics. But to the question of the rural-urban divide, yes, of course, that the Democratic Socialists of America, for example, have had most of their successes in major urban areas in America. But the left agenda is popular across the board right now. I mean, I think you might have to run a different kind of Democratic Socialist campaign in a rural area, where I'm from, Muskegon, Michigan, for example, small city that's situated in a fairly rural part of Western Michigan. But the polls show that majorities of people, strong majorities, support the big planks of the Democratic Socialist agenda, like Medicare for all. Everyone understands that we desperately need Medicare for all, and that was why Bernie was able to get as far as he did in both of these campaigns, right? It's because he had a sort of laser-like focus on the stuff that was both desperately needed and he knew already had a constituency that supported the things that he was pushing for. There's a real exhaustion in the country right now, I think, both with the sort of rabid right-wing agenda that we saw, in Donald Trump, that we saw in George W. Bush before him, but also an exhaustion with liberalism, the centrist liberalism, that doesn't seem to be capable of doing anything or even interested in winning much transformational change in people's lives. And so the openings that creates for leftists, again, they depend on where you are, but across the board, there's a lot of energy and hunger and appetite for things like taxing the rich and Medicare for all. And that agenda can win in places that are not LA, New York, or Chicago.
How do you make sure that the organizations stay militant? Because I mean, there's also the nonprofit industrial complex, which I think feeds into the political industrial complex, which is, I mean, I think both of us are old enough to remember when John Kerry was swift voted, and suddenly these like new organizations popped up. Some were much more to the left, Move On with their, anti-war petition, and, Democracy for America. A lot of these organizations emerged post-Kerry. And then there was like an institution that helped fund a lot of these organizations. And, many of them now are either extremely neoliberal and just have very large lists, or have, some sort of very specific focused agenda, or they're just kind of like weak leftist groups that, maybe had a lot of promise 15 years ago, but were dependent on corporate funding or, major donor funding. The business model, made it so that they were little by little, the frog got boiled.
Yeah, this is a huge issue across the progressive left, anything from the kind of organizations that you mentioned. Certainly in the Black Lives Matter moment, there's a lot of, all of a sudden, foundations are throwing all kinds of money at the Black Lives Matter cause, something that all progressives and socialists should support, obviously. But the way that the NGO complex kind of moves in and grabs some of the most promising members and then distorts the whole social movement landscape is something that's really important. I mean, as I mentioned, the book is a lot of it about the Democratic Socialists of America, which is a model that is very different from that kind of NGO model. One that is not based on foundation funding, one that has 100,000 members around the country who are engaged in electoral campaigns in their various local contexts because people believe in those candidates, not because there is some kind of cushy sinecure job that'll pay them six figures or whatever in order to back some socialist candidate. No, people are doing it because they actually believe in it. And as somebody who works for a socialist magazine, I can attest that this is not where the money is at. This is not where you go to become, to accrue fame and fortune. You go there because you believe in it. And so that kind of grassroots organizing that is not interested in sort of being just funneled into the NGO apparatus is crucial, as well as the rebuilding the labor movement, which of course labor, for all of its problems, which we could talk about all day, does not have that same kind of problem of NGOism, at least at this point. Labor is this, an institution that is funded by union members themselves, working class people themselves, and exists to carry out the interests of working class people rather than the interests of, whatever a billionaire liberal funder decides are his interests for the day or the week or the year. So, the rebuilding an actual socialist left that is not accountable to those kind of funders and rebuilding the labor movement are two absolutely crucial tasks, which, again, early days to be saying this, but it does seem like those are that both of those things, both of the kind of building of those institutions and rebuilding those institutions are underway.
And of course, the labor movement, I mean, having labor leaders who come from that actual workforce rather than, the organizational professional class that come in, and that's like part of the whole, we've talked about this in the show a lot, the friction within labor. I'm really kind of curious about this whole idea of like, how do we stay militant? I mean, how does DSA stay militant? Even there's plenty of, the structures, I think, meaning like the funding structure is part of it, but then it's growing so fast, or it has been growing so fast. How does DSA stay militant? I know there's lots of different, factions, whether it's electorally or not, but simultaneously, like, learn the lessons. Like, how are we learning our lessons and staying militant at the same time? Does that make sense?
The most surefire way to do that is to purchase Bigger Than Bernie by Micah Uetricht and Megan Day, because we talk about this.
You're such a capitalist. I was
You like
asking the
that?
question so I didn't have to read the book, Micah. Come on.
Well, for your many viewers, the secrets can only be revealed if they purchase a copy of the book. I mean, this is a question. I mean, okay, there's no like I can't give you the blueprint and then everybody just goes and follows it or whatever. I mean, like, this is stuff that has to be figured out as these movements are building. We have to make the road by walking, as the Spanish phrase goes from the Zapatistas. But clearly there is a group of people in the DSA who understand that this is a real danger, that there is a long history of people, left-wing radicals getting involved in organizing, stoking militancy, whether it's strikes or whether it's people who are running for elected office, who are leftists, and them getting sucked towards more conservatism. They're in the halls of power, and there's all of a sudden buddy with the bad guys who don't want that militancy, who it really scares them. So I mean, it begins with a commitment to just understanding that is the dynamic that we all have to face, that we have to preserve and stoke and not let that kind of militancy disappear, because that is the root of working class power, is workers' ability to go on strike, poor people's ability to make a ruckus in the streets, left legislators' ability to call out the BS, including among the supposed left-wing parties like the Democrats, when it comes down the pike. On the other hand, we should also be careful. I mean, some people have heard that lesson and think, okay, I need to be taking the most militant stance at all times. That's the only way that I can stop myself from being pulled rightward, and so I'm going to be demanding my sort of maximalist program at all times. And I think that's certainly not a way for the left to become bigger and more powerful in the country. I mean, that just sort of is a way to ensure that you stay marginal and that you don't actually appeal to the masses of people who in this moment, we understand, as we were talking about earlier, actually are interested in this left-wing agenda. People are interested in taxing the rich and figuring out what to do about climate change and all of that. And so there's a danger on both of those things. You don't want to just slide into the kind of conservatism that the existing institutions will pull these kind of left-wing insurgents into, but you also don't want to be so militant with your rhetoric at all times that you turn people off, and then you get to sort of feel smug about, well, I'm making sure that I'm not selling out and I'm not getting rid of this militancy. But that's the easiest thing in the world to do when it's just like you and a couple of your friends posting on Twitter and feeling good about yourself. So we have to avec both of those things.
Basically, we all have to be evolved humans who go to therapy and are able to communicate with each other, because I think most of the issues have to do with it. How do we prevent socialists from becoming men's rights activists? That's what I would like to know. No, it's based on a Majority Report conversation earlier today. Sorry to suck you in. Micah, parting thoughts, warnings, advice. You are our therapist today. Welcome.
Oh, yes. Well, happy to. We got to win Medicare for all so that everybody can get all the therapy that they so desperately need in this moment, right? Exactly. I mean, the reason that we wrote this book is because we think that we're in this really unique moment, one where, to restate, we don't want to overstate what the advances that have been made, or the victory, the future socialist utopia is not right around the corner, but there is a new moment here, one that could disappear at any moment, right? For any variety of reasons. I mean, historically, there are these openings in American society that allow for an advance of left-wing politics, and they close eventually, and then things get bad, and I mean, I don't know, maybe people like you and me go to jail. Hopefully that doesn't happen. What
are you doing, man?
I'm just editing articles and writing books.
You. They just demonetize you and smear you and like.
Well, that's a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. They don't have to get to that point because there are many opportunities ahead of time for them to stop you. But
why make us martyrs? Come on.
Right. But this opportunity is here, and so we tried to take stock in the book, like, what has changed since Bernie's first campaign, and how do we need to deepen the seizing of those opportunities through both electoral means and non-electoral organizing around what does good union organizing look like? What is good other kinds like fighting for a Green New Deal and all. We talk about all of this in the book because we think that this is like a unique moment that has to be seized. It's the best chance that we have to create a livable society and to save the planet from burning to a crisp. So we should actually think very hard and very seriously about how to do that before the opportunity slips through our fingers.
I think the solution is just to turn off your air conditioning during the day and not run your refrigerator. That's the solution for letting us not burn to a crisp. That's their solution.
You'll have to read the defense of air conditioning that we published in Jacobin, I think, last summer. We would disagree with both of those things.
I would
Especially
too,
your fridge. Don't unplug the fridge. Then you got to throw the food out. That's not sustainable.
Listen,
come on.
You can't be, if you want to be a good climate activist, don't criticize the power grid being privatized. Just don't use anything. Just give up on society.
Well, so you're making these jokes, but I would say that the fact that you can make that joke is an indicator that the left is in a better place than it was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I first became a socialist. Like that was the kind of stuff that people were seriously talking about like 15 years ago. Now we understand that like saving the planet is not based on you like making all the food in your fridge spoil or whatever. Yeah. If it's about individual consumption, then yeah, like it seems to me like the best thing you could do for the planet would be to like kill yourself. Like, no, that's not what we're telling people to do. Like, we want you to stick around.
I mean, some people,
they're wrong. We want you to live. We want you to stick around. We want you to eat the food out of your fridge. We want to give that food to everybody else so that they can also eat food out of the fridge, and we can do that. And that's where thank God that the left is now at that point where
I don't know if we're fully there. I'm still fighting with some of these like ban plastic straws thing. I mean, yes, they should be banned. They're killing animals, and I mean, I understand, but yes, and we can go bigger than that, a little bit bigger.
I mean, and that is what the promise of a campaign like the Bernie Sanders campaign showed us. It was like, yes, we actually can go bigger than that. We can make bigger demands. We can point the finger at the right villains, which is not, you for putting a straw in your drink at Starbucks. It's the 1%. It's the people who are making ungodly amounts of money and make the decisions about whether or not you have a straw in your coffee every day, or whether or not we go to war in Iraq, or whether or not you have health insurance or not. I mean, we're starting to point the finger at the correct villains at this point, and thank God for that.
I'll see you on Joe Manchin's lawn in a couple of days.
We'll be happy to be there with you.
Micah Uetricht, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, you can go check out Bigger Than Bernie, sold by Verso Books. What a year to publish a book. I think everybody should be doing. Yeah. I know you didn't get much of a. You can go around and do these book parties, but you can still do it. You could just be on tour forever. Why not? This isn't going away. People are not going to lose interest in Bernie anytime soon. So go check out.
Listen, if any of your listeners are willing to fund me to go fly, I'll go wherever. I'm ready to get out of the house. The pandemic's over. Let's go. I'm going to talk about this book. I'll talk about whatever you want. Just bring me.
Get the guy out of his house. He'll read you. Story time. Bigger Than Bernie with Megan Day, of course, right. Co-author. How we go from the Sanders campaign to democratic socialism. Go check it out at Verso Books. Micah, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Stay cool. Stay cool. All right, everybody, we will be right back after this brief little break with our panel. We have Benjamin Dixon and Napoleon the Legend here. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Ooh, look at this panel today. I love this panel. I'm excited. Napoleon, a legend, is of course a regular on the Nomiki Show, but he is also an Afrobeat hip hop artist, Brooklyn based. But where are you right now? Are you still in France?
Berlin right now.
Oh, you're in Berlin.
Yeah.
Just changing to Berlin. Are you going to be? Are you doing German now, or can you do German?
I'm working on it. It's complicated.
A little bit complicated. You should meet up with a run. The two of you are in Berlin. You should come on Thursdays to get. Oh my gosh, let's make this happen. All right, all right.
All right.
Benjamin Dixon is, of course, the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show. He is. I did not. I need a copy of your book. Did you know that you have a book called "God Is Not a Republican"?
It's a classic. It's old, but yeah.
I know. I didn't know
honestly,
about
sometimes I do
this.
forget I have it. Yeah.
You forget you have. You have to do
So
the tour, and then you're also the host of Like It or
The
Not,
revised-
which airs
oh.
when?
Yes. Every day at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, AM.
8 a.m. And how long does it go for?
We're there. We usually do. Actually, you know what? Somebody just corrected me. Yeah. It is 8 a.m. It used to start at 8:30. Now we're at 8 a.m. and we're live until no, somebody in one of my chats just corrected me. And we're live until 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. So it's a good 2.5 hour block. We cover the news and politics, and then by the end of the day, we're just laughing and having a good time.
Ben, how many hours a day are you on air? This is why I
Not too
asked this
many.
question.
No, I
This is
don't
why I
know.
asked this question about the morning hours, because I'm just like, how do you do this, man? How do you do it? It's impressive. Okay. Anyways,
I adjust sleeping schedules. Yeah. But you know how we do it. We adjust sleeping schedules and we keep the grind going.
we just ignore our kids. We just don't eat. It's really simple. Our friends are the cameras. All right. Speaking of people who love cameras, I'm talking about, no, I'm kidding, but they're the politicians, of course. So there's this idea of bipartisanship, which folks have been obsessed with for years. The idea of bipartisan, my concept of bipartisanship is very simple. It only works when we are not in power. When we are in power, who gives an F? Who cares? We've got the numbers. We've got the ability to hold power over committee positions and over our members. I mean, that's kind of Chuck Schumer's job or Joe Biden's job. So finally, AOC, we need AOC to be out there like calling it what it is, and everybody needs to, not buy into this BS of bipartisanship. So she calls out the myth of bipartisanship. Let's play this clip. Got that. Hold tight, guys. 1 second. Hold tight. I need like that pause music for when the clips aren't working. Come up with a song when the clips aren't working. That's your job, Napoleon. How are we doing, guys? Is it working? Oh, live shows. You know how it rolls, Ben.
Absolutely, like 100% am having the flashbacks. So
oh, you're having the flashback. Oh, I guess there was a link that we had a bad link here. Okay, hang on 1 second. Sorry, guys. Nope, that's the right one. I'm looking at it right now. It's the recount. It's the top of the, now we're giving you behind the scenes. It is the link that is the top of our rundown news list right now, everybody. Hold tight. Okay, let's just talk about it in the meantime while we're figuring this out. Apologies, guys. It's not like we don't know. Let's talk about bipartisanship. Actually, let's start with Napoleon. Does the idea of bipartisanship, because I love this in Europe, you're a man of the world, you've like lived in multiple countries. In multi-party, where you have these coalitions, do they use words like bipartisan, or is coalition more transactional? Because I understand the idea of partnering up with the other side when you need to get something passed, but bipartisanship seems to be something completely different than coalitions. What's your take being?
I mean, it feels like it's mostly an American thing, since it is the two-party system, and there's no other options or viable options in that system, and I think it's an antiquated thing that just sounds good to people to sell them on our system, which is flawed and needs to be, adjusted for modern times, maybe. You know what I'm saying? And I think they ran this word to the ground. I think a lot of people are still buying it because they don't look deeper into it. This is why it's important for people like AOC, people that have a big platform like her, to be calling it out for what it is and framing it as an old school way of thinking. And it's time for modern times. Bipartisan is a myth. It doesn't go anywhere. All it does is, and we know, like Republicans especially, all they do is play interference when they're not in power. And we can't expect them to work in good faith anyways.
Let's play the clip. We have it up there now. Sorry, guys.
At the Capitol, a debate inside one party on the future of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. That is because some of her high-profile allies are coming to her defense this morning, blaming right-wing media for, they say, twisting her recent comments on the Middle East, where the Congresswoman appeared to compare the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. The Congresswoman clarifying, saying, to be clear, I was in no way equating terrorist organizations with democratic countries with well-established judicial systems.
We're having some issues. Sorry, guys, we're sorting out some kinks. Ben, what's your deal on what's your take on bipartisanship?
No, I think Napoleon, I think you actually hit that spot on, man. Because what we'll find too often is we'll find the people who are crying for bipartisanship, they're doing so on behalf of giving concessions to people who don't want us to be free. You're reaching across the aisle, Kirsten Cinema, Joe Manchin. You're reaching across the aisle to people who don't even want us to vote. So what's there for us to really to be bipartisan about? Especially when Nomiki, like you said, they only talk about bipartisanship when they're not in power. Because when Republicans are in power, they don't give a damn about bipartisanship. They go and do whatever they want to do.
No, that's exactly it. And it's I mean, the procedural aspect of this, I feel like they're using procedure because they don't have anything else to defend themselves on now. So Joe Manchin, who's an institutionalist, Kirsten Sinema, who suddenly cares so much about bipartisanship and institutional, norms. Her defense of the filibuster was she believes in democracy. Like it is, I mean, I actually think it's showing their weakness. And I think that we as a movement are actually potentially losing an opportunity right now to prey on that weakness and really hold their feet, not Sinema and Manchin. I think they're weaker than they even think. Biden and Schumer. I mean, he has pretty much all the cards right now, and he's just off singing I Love New York on the streets of New York and trying not to get primaried. But I don't even think it has to do with electoral power. I think they need to feel it. They need to be embarrassed. They need to be dragged.
I agree. I mean, they're obviously hiding behind it. It's easy for them to use that word as it's the ultimate excuse, bipartisanship, and it never happens. And I guess they don't feel the pressure too much to actually get something done. They can still use that excuse. It works, and they're going to still ride it until it doesn't work anymore. We got to make sure it doesn't work anymore in however we can.
Ben, what do you think we need to do in terms of applying pressure to the right people? Like, what are we missing right now? I mean, you've organized on the ground. You guys did it in Georgia very well.
Yeah, but it's funny you should mention that. What we should be doing is primarying these people. Mm-hmm. We should be preparing to primary anybody. Even just the threat of a primary would have changed the course of a lot of this. But truth be told, we couldn't get to that because of all the other foolishness that's been happening. We couldn't organize the left to primary because that's the real challenge to their power. And so long as they feel nice and comfortable in their seats, they can keep playing these games. But if we mount meaningful challenges and start picking them off again one at a time, then we'll have the impact that we need.
I mean, simultaneously, you have the Republicans who are thinking, 100 million years in advance constantly, and simultaneously, like trying to stifle any sort of movement that's happening on our end. It's not even happening from the centrists anymore. The centrists, it's almost like the Republicans are like, oh my God, Nancy Pelosi can't control, the squad, so we're going to have to do it in our own way. And one of the ways that they're doing that is they have created their own little squad stars, whether it's Nicole Maliotakis putting herself out there. She's representative from Staten Island as the anti-AOC, or Elise Stefanik, who is now the the deputy, whatever, she took over for Liz Cheney. And of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who the Republicans are creating as an alternative, and Lauren Boebert, of course, to AOC. Let's roll that clip. We got that one.
At the Capitol, a debate inside one party on the future of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. That is because some of her high-profile allies are coming to her defense this morning, blaming right-wing media for, they say, twisting her recent comments on the Middle East, where the Congresswoman appeared to compare the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. The Congresswoman clarifying, saying, to be clear, I was in no way equating terrorist organizations with democratic countries with well-established judicial systems. That seemed to satisfy party leadership and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So, Garrett Haake, who is joining us now here on set, lovely to see you, my friend. So is that it? Is this the end of the drama or the saga for this?
Well,
Okay, so I don't know, something's going on with their clips, guys. I'm sorry about that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is obviously putting herself out there right now as the alternative to AOC. And with that, these fights, right? I think there's a strategic moment here where we as a movement have to say, do we have to respond to everything she does, or don't we? And I think they're looking to raise money off of AOC, raise money off of taking advantage of the squad, raise money and attention, and divert the conversation away from what the squad talks about all day long. When Ilhan Omar talks about Israel being, Israel creating an apartheid state. When AOC talks about, the conditions in her district, or of course, when Cori Bush talks about the police violence that happens in her community when they're not, it's so much oxygen, right? Only so much oxygen. So I think it's a brilliant tactic by Republicans to raise money, to, divert attention, to pit us against each other. Ben, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, it works so perfectly well for the Republican establishment. It works well for the Democratic establishment. It works so well to attack the squad that you would think that it could also be something that they would organize, that someone in the establishment would organize an all-out assault on the squad in that manner. And the Republicans would do that too, because it's a win-win. It helps maintain the power structure of the establishment to have a weakened squad. If the squad can't go out there and fundraise and raise money to primary other people, that's a win for the Democrats. If they are now the boogeyman for Republicans, they could raise all kind of money on the squad. And I think that's what we've been living through since easily since the 2020 election.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the right wing. They always use cultural issues like the cultural warrior stuff in order to deviate or take the attention away from actual policy. So when the squad says something that makes sense, they'll bring up something that makes no sense, but it's effective because people still respond to it. People share it, all that reactionary stuff. It's like even to see the equivalent, their so-called equivalent of AOC or the squad, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's bad SHIT crazy. You know what I'm saying? It just shows you like the difference between both of the fields. And unless I always thought, I don't know the answer to this, but I feel like somehow we know we have the policies that people want, and that people, if they were to understand them, they'll be behind these policies that make sense for everybody. I think that somehow we need a counter for all that culture war stuff that happens on the right, that gets shared even by, the Black community and stuff that I follow on Facebook and all that. Like every time they start something,
yeah.
and even the hip hop community that I'm in, and I just hate the way it permeates through, and nobody and people stay focused on it instead of the real issues that interesting people are talking about.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if both of you guys are very evolved men, and I'd be interested in seeing like if one male leader, like maybe a Bernie Sanders or somebody else. It doesn't even have to be Bernie, but somebody who has enough of a following could literally call them on it. I mean, there's always and obviously I'm more progressive, but it was always Hillary Clinton in the 90s, then it's Nancy Pelosi, now it's AOC, and it's Ilhan Omar, and it's Cori Bush, and it's Ayanna Pressley. It's always a woman, and it's most likely a woman of color now that, Nancy doesn't have to be the person that they're making out to be the boogie woman. And it's never, they barely even talk about Bernie. And they do, they call him a cranky uncle. Okay, that's their big attack. I would love to see maybe male leadership step up and say, this is a tactic. This is a tactic that they're using to distract you away from the fact that you don't have health care. Like a man confronting these misogynistic tendencies, because I think that even people on the left fall for it and don't even realize it. I don't know. What do you guys think? You're men.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just listening and processing that in real time, because no, they don't give Bernie Sanders the kind of hell that they give the squad from any direction. They don't fearmonger around Bernie Sanders the way they do the squad. And, of course, there's racism in there, right? But the sexism part of it is Fox News knows exactly who they're talking to and they're trying to sell these pillows to on these commercial breaks. They're talking to a bunch of old, disgruntled men who are dissatisfied with their lives, and they hate their wives and their partners. And so, of course, to them, having someone like AOC describe the sexist way Fox News characterizes her, of course, that's going to sell to that type of demographic. And that's the game that's being played. And you're right. It also people on the left fall for this as well.
Misogyny is a business model.
Yeah, I mean, people, there's slogans like, let's say the Black community protect Black women and stuff. Nobody's coming protecting Ilhan when she gets attacked, for example. I mean, I'm saying nobody. Of course, I'm generalizing. I see it on Twitter, but it's just, it feels like we pick and choose the wrong battles sometimes, and there's no clarity as to who actually has our back, and that's very important.
Yeah, and I bring this up because the types of attacks the squad is getting, they're forced to defend themselves. They're forced to have to every 5 days go through another round of life-threatening attacks where they have to suddenly divert their attention away from their own safety, their own goals, their own policies that they're pushing forward. Their press team suddenly is off the beat of the policies and now on the beat of, oh my God, we have to defend ourselves. They have to put more money into security. I mean, it's not just that they're the products of the focus of conversation. It's that they have to adjust their life to respond to this misogyny that actually has very dire consequences on people's lives, not just through the inability to focus and pass legislation that affects, hopefully millions of people's lives, but their own lives and their families and their safety.
Because we're still in a violent white supremacist country at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same things that we would see years before are still happening. These type of attacks are greenlit. Nobody calls it out. Nobody is outraged about them. We're attacking women. I just don't understand it. But it's white supremacy at work. I see it as that, at least.
Yep. Here.
Yeah. No, that's all. I wouldn't have much more to say with that. It is structural, and it is the same. It's multiple sides of the same beast that we're fighting. And at the core of it is white supremacy, it's capitalism, it is patriarchy, it is all the phobias, all of the isms, all those things tied together. That's what we're fighting against.
That's it. Ben Dixon, Napoleon the Legend, thanks for dealing with our little tech issues, but it doesn't matter. The three of us can just sit and talk forever. I mean, do it with drinks in person. We got it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for having us.
Anytime.
Now that we're doing real life stuff.
Always a pleasure.
Go meet up with the run, Napoleon.
We'll do.
All right.
Thank
you guys so much. Thanks for everything. And I know Kenzo's in the chat right now. Kenzo Shibata. Go check out Kenzo Shibata's podcast. It's on, I don't know if it's on his YouTube. He's got a few. and he has this rotating microphone thing for each of his shows. But the Kenzo Shibata show, I know, is one of them. And I think they're all on the same YouTube. But great thinker, great organizer, great teacher. We have a couple of comments, real quick comments, and then I unfortunately have to wrap. But some real quick comments. We have Michael Reich says, I knew we had gone over the edge the first time I heard clean coal. Exactly. Alex Orlowski said, the universalist expanding social services, and general warfare state kind of policies probably could resonate with most people in rural places. Agreed. Olivia Ally says, they're organizing a youth workers union on TikTok. Cool. It's really impressive. They're fed up and awoke during COVID lockdown. I have a lot of thoughts about that, because I think that these tech companies are exploiting the people who are on them. Orb Rumors says, political graft occurs when funds intended for public projects are intentionally misdirected in order to maximize the benefits to private interests. Yes. Our first book of the book club was the Plunket of Tammany Hall. It's a quick little book, and it talks about how Tammany Hall used graft, but it's really brilliant. And there's a lot of great lessons in that book, good and bad, like cautionary lessons and just like how to be a good politician and understand that, power, air conditioning, potholes, that's kind of a big part of politics. All right, everybody, we love you. Thanks for your patience today. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Join us at twitch.tv/the_Nomiki_show_. You can go check us out there, everybody on Twitch in the chats. And of course on YouTube right here, make sure to click subscribe and like and be a fan. Join us on fans.com/The Nomiki Show, I think is it. And of course, patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. You can also join our book club. We've got that undergoing right now. See you tomorrow. Stay in solidarity.